Text 49. Asakta buddhi sarvatra chitatma vigata spriha nishkarmya siddhim paramam sanyasena adhikachati. Translation. One can obtain the results of renunciation simply by self-control and by becoming unattached to material things and disregarding material enjoyments. That is the highest perfectional stage of renunciation. Text 50. Siddhim prapto yata brahma tatha noti nibodhame samasenaiva konteya nishtha jnanasya ya para. Translation. O son of Kunti, learn from me in brief how one can attain to the supreme perfectional stage, Brahman, by acting in the way which I shall now summarize. Text 51 to 53. Buddhya vishuddhaya yukto dhrityatmanam niyamya cha shabdadim nishriyang stvaktva raga dvesha vivasya cha vivikta sevi lagvashi yatha vakaya manasa dhyana yoga paro nityam vairagyam samupashita ahankaram balam darpam kamam krodham partrigraham vimuchya nirmama shanto brahma bhuyaya kalpate. Translation. Being purified by his intelligence and controlling the mind with determination, giving up the objects of sense gratification, being freed from attachment and hatred, one who lives in a secluded place, who eats little and who controls the body and the tongue, and is always in trance and is detached, who is without false ego, false strength, false pride, lust, anger, and who does not accept material things, such a person is certainly elevated to the position of self-realization. Text 54. Samasarveshu bhuteshu madbhaktim labhate param. Can you turn this mic down a little bit? Translation. One who is thus transcendentally situated at once realizes the supreme Brahman. He never laments nor desires to have anything. He is equally disposed to every living entity. In that state he attains pure devotional service unto me. Text 55. Bhaktya mam abhijanati yavan yashchasmi tattvataha tato mam tattvato gyatva vishate tadanantaram. Translation. One can understand the Supreme Personality as he is only by devotional service, and when one is in full consciousness of the Supreme Lord by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God. Text 56. Sarva karmanyapi sada karvano madhyapashya mat prasadadavapnoti shashvatam padam avyayam. Translation. Though engaged in all kinds of activities, my devotee, under my protection, reaches the eternal and imperishable abode by my grace. Last text, 57. Chetasa sarvakarmani mayi sanyasya matparaha buddhi yogam upashritya machchita satatang bhava. Translation. In all activities, just depend upon me and work always under my protection. In such devotional service, be fully conscious of me. So 47. It is better to engage in one's own occupation, even though one may perform it imperfectly, than to accept another's occupation and perform it perfectly. Prescribed duties, according to one's nature, are never affected by sinful reactions. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. One's occupational duty is prescribed in Bhagavad Gita. As already discussed in previous verses, the duties of a Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra are prescribed according to the particular modes of nature. One should not imitate another's duty. A man who is by nature attracted to the kind of work done by Shudras should not artificially claim himself to be a Brahmana, although he may be born into a Brahmana family. In this way, one should work according to his own nature. No work is abominable, if performed in the service of the Supreme Lord. The occupational duty of a Brahmana is certainly in the mode of goodness, but if a person is not by nature in the mode of goodness, he should not imitate the occupational duty of a Brahmana. For a Kshatriya or administrator, there are so many abominable things. A Kshatriya has to be violent to kill his enemies. Sometimes a Kshatriya has to tell lies for the sake of diplomacy. Such violence and duplicity accompany political affairs, but a Kshatriya is not supposed to give up his occupational duty and try to perform the duties of a Brahmana. One should act to satisfy the Supreme Lord. For example, Arjuna was a Kshatriya. He was hesitating to fight the other party. But if such fighting is performed for the sake of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there need be no fear of degradation. In the business field also, sometimes a merchant has to tell so many lies to make a profit. If he does not do so, there can be no profit. Sometimes a merchant says, "Oh, my dear customer, for you I am making no profit." But one should know that without profit, the merchant cannot exist. Therefore, it should be taken as a simple lie. If a merchant says that he is not making a profit, but the merchant should not think that because he is engaged in an occupation which the telling of lies is compulsory, he should give up his profession and pursue the profession of a Brahmana. That is not recommended. Whether one is a Kshatriya, a Vaishya, or a Shudra doesn't matter. If he serves by his work the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even Brahmanas who perform different types of sacrifice sometimes must kill animals, because sometimes animals are sacrificed in such ceremonies. Similarly, if a Kshatriya engaged in his own occupation kills an enemy, there is no sin incurred. In the third chapter, these matters have been clearly and elaborately explained. Every man should work for the purpose of yajna, or for Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anything done for personal sense gratification is a cause of bondage. The conclusion is that everyone should be engaged according to the particular mode of nature he has acquired, and he should decide to work only to serve the supreme cause of the Supreme Lord. So this is quite important. There is many important points in this purport and this theme of this verse. One of the last key points was that anything done for personal sense gratification is a cause of bondage. So this is the foundational principle of the struggle in material existence, is that the living entities are all bound to this material world because they are entangled by their activities of sense gratification. And that's why Krishna says, that verse, Mamai vangso jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana manasastra indriyani prakriti stani karshati, that all of these living entities in this world, they're all my parts and parcels, my fragments, but they are struggling very hard with the six senses, which include the mind. So this struggle, or this karshati, is due to one's desire for sense enjoyment, and thus they perform sense gratification, which all initially begins from contemplation, as Krishna says in the second chapter, Dhyayato Vishyan Pumsa, that from this contemplation of the sense objects, then one becomes attached, develops lust, and then ultimately acts out, and then becomes entangled in material bondage. So the polarity here is activities for Krishna or activities for sense gratification. That's your two options. So Prabhupada says the conclusion is that everyone should be engaged according to the particular mode of nature they have acquired, and they should decide to work only to serve the supreme cause of the Supreme Lord. So even Srila Prabhupada, he instructed his leaders to engage devotees according to their natures, or in their particular natures. So devotees also are engaged according to their propensities as well. And also, we also may be put in a position where we have to perform service, which is not necessarily, we feel or believe that it's our nature, but because we're being asked to do it by the spiritual master or by our authorities as a duty, then we perform it, because ultimately devotional service is beyond mundane consideration, and these natures that we are, physio-psycho natures that we are actually have, are on the material platform. For a Vaishnava, they could perform any duty or any service, like we know the case of Parshuram and various other personalities can perform any duty for the sake of the Lord, even though it may not be necessarily their nature, their physio-psycho nature that they have. So these are some points about this verse. And the next verse is Krishna speaking about how all of our endeavors are actually covered by some fault. So we're in material world, so we have to expect that there's faults in the work that goes on here, because that's the nature of this world. Simply the laws of nature. There's some fault within it. And what to speak of this time, Krishna is speaking in Dwapara Yuga, but in Kali Yuga, there's an ocean of faults. So faults are there. It's not, something which is uncommon. It's actually the most common. If you just look around, you can see faults. It's just Kali Yuga, but we don't necessarily want to focus on faults, especially of devotees, but more so that we focus on the good qualities and the bright side of our existence, which is that we're given an opportunity to practice Krishna consciousness. Like you can think, the characteristics of the age of Kali are so intense. If you study the 12th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, I don't remember what chapter it is, but one of the later chapters in the canto explains the characteristics of this age of Kali. And it degrades, more and more and more, and becomes more insane to live. So many faults are there. They just increase and increase and intensify. But the saints and acharyas explain there's so many faults, but there's one good quality about this age of Kali, and that is that by chanting the Harinam, Sankirtan, one can attain supreme perfection of life. So that is the great quality of this Kali Yuga. And so it is explained that the demigods are waiting in line to take birth so that they can perfect their lives in this age of Kali. Because they know by performance of Sankirtan, it's such an easy process that they can attain all perfection. Of course, it may not be so easy for us. It's simple, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's very easy. It's easy to do, but it doesn't mean that there won't be difficulties. But the process itself is you just chant, you dance, you feast, be kind to devotees and read the Shastras and enjoy devotion. You enjoy devotional service. Not that we want to enjoy, but the nature of devotional service is that it's enjoyable. Su sukham kartamavyam. So, and that way it becomes easy. Like, yeah, the activities that I do in devotional service are more enjoyable. They're less entangling. They're way better than material activities, which leave me in so much anxiety. Like immediately material activities leave you in so much anxiety. If you perform any material activity, automatically anxiety comes, stress, your mind becomes disturbed, So, we'll read this purport here. In conditioned life, all work is contaminated by the material modes of nature. Even if one is a Brahmana, he has to perform sacrifices in which animal killing is necessary. Similarly, a Kshatriya, however pious he may be, has to fight enemies. He cannot avoid it. Similarly, a merchant, however pious he may be, must sometimes hide his profit to stay in business, or he may sometimes have to do business on the black market. These things are necessary. One cannot avoid them. Similarly, even though a man is a Shudra serving a bad master, he has to carry out the order of the master, even though it should not be done. Despite these flaws, one should continue to carry out his prescribed duties, for they are born out of his own nature. A very nice example is given herein. Although fire is pure, still there is smoke. Yet smoke does not make the fire impure. Even though there is smoke in the fire, fire is still considered to be the purest of all elements. If one prefers to give up the work of a Kshatriya and take the occupation of a Brahmana, he is not assured that in the occupation of a Brahmana there are no unpleasant duties. One may then conclude that in the material world, no one can be completely free from the contamination of material nature. This example of fire and smoke is very appropriate in this connection. When, in wintertime, one takes a stone from the fire, sometimes smoke disturbs the eyes and other parts of the body, but still one must make use of the fire despite disturbing conditions. Similarly, one should not give up his natural occupation because there are some disturbing elements. Rather, one should be determined to serve the Supreme Lord by his occupational duty in Krishna consciousness. That is the perfectional point. When a particular type of occupation is performed for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord, all the defects in that particular occupation are purified. When the results of work are purified, when connected with devotional service, one becomes perfect in seeing the self within, and that is self-realization. So these characteristics of devotional service is that it's all auspicious. So material activities are more or less always inauspicious because one is entangled in samsara. But this devotional service, no matter what time, place, circumstance you perform, it will always be auspicious because it's transcendental to the modes of nature. So are there any comments or questions about these verses? Yes, Mridanga Prabhu? Hare Krishna.
In the Hare Krishna, in the beginning of the purport where it says that even if one is a Brahmana, he has to perform sacrifices in which animal killing is necessary. My question is, why is animal killing necessary if unless everyone is not eating flesh of the animal, and how does the sacrifice of an animal please the Lord? And it seems kind of primitive.
Yeah, well, we hear that these animal sacrifices, they are actually prescribed in some of the Vedas. So it is ordained in the scriptures to perform it in a certain way. for a particular purpose. And generally we hear that because these people need to be elevated, they may be attracted to meat or whatever. So they're performing that, sinful activity of eating meat, but they're doing it in accordance to the Vedic way of doing it. In that way that there's some progress being made, some purification. But by the way that the sacrifice is set up, we hear that when one wants to eat meat or something, there's a sacrifice which you have to whisper in, I think, the goat's ear or something, that next life you can do this to me, So like it's pretty heavy on the consciousness, for a sane person to do, and to slit the throat of the goat. So, progress is being made, and if it's ordained in the scripture, then, you're not acting whimsically. So it's not, obviously, doing these sacrifices in the name of, eating meat is not necessarily like the best thing you could do, but for those type of people, it's there's some injunction for it. So it's necessary for that sacrifice or whatever. And to do that, there must be some brahmanas, chant the Vedic mantras and all that. So the sacrifice, the animal killing is involved in that sacrifice. So it is, in one sense, contaminated by the modes of nature. So, there's a sacrifice where the brahmanas chant mantras to prove the efficacies of the mantras, and the animal dies but is reborn, in a more suitable body or fresh body. So in one sense, like you say, that's animal killing, but also it's reborn. So that's involved too, Of course, Krishna doesn't necessarily want these to go on. He even sent Lord Buddha because it's the nature of the conditioned being to want to enjoy unrestrictedly, right? Like, okay, I can do this sense gratification a regular way, but why so many rules? Why so many injunctions? Why do I have to perform a sacrifice like this? And then they might enjoy unrestrictedly in this age of Kali. Everything is becoming unrestricted. But people aren't becoming more happy. Actually, everyone's becoming more and more entangled and disturbed. So Krishna came as, an incarnation of Lord Buddha to stop these people from performing animal sacrifices in the name of the Vedas. So it's not necessarily that Krishna, wants is pleased by these, or he wants these killings to happen, but he gives some sanction for it in the Vedas. So if people follow, then they're following scripture, or they're following Krishna's instructions. But it's meant for their upliftment, ultimately. Although it's not, it's better just to chant Hare Krishna.
Krishna,
it's easier than performing these sacrifices. Just chant Hare Krishna.
I have a question. When Lord Chaitanya left home to take up full-time preaching, he seemingly abandoned his duties as a householder. Could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, he was 24 years old. He had a mother, he had a young wife, no child, second wife, no child. And he took sannyas. So you could say it's very controversial. But the higher principle was that he explained to his mother that by preaching Krishna consciousness and as a sannyasi and traveling and focusing solely on preaching Krishna consciousness, then the whole world would become his family. So the higher principle was that of renunciation from all material life. So when one performs devotional service, there's a quote in Shastra that one is not obliged to anybody anymore, family, demigods. All your debts are wiped away, because when you're born in this world, you have debts. You have debts to your forefathers who gave you this body, your debts to the demigods who are providing the necessities of life. You're indebted to the saintly persons that are giving scriptural knowledge. Like this. So you have these debts that are due, and that you perform some offerings, some sacrifice to your forefathers and to satisfy your debts, to pay back your debts to such factors. But when one serves, when one serves Krishna, then all your debts are paid off. You don't have any more obligation, in the ultimate perspective of it. But we may, because we're a preaching movement, we may not necessarily act, so we may not act so literally on that platform, meaning that we may not just abandon everything, abandon all your family members that you had, abandon, certain obligations you had in the material world. But if it's favorable for your Krishna consciousness and preaching Krishna consciousness, then you may continue to satisfy certain obligations that you have, even if it's on a material platform, like family members, It may be helpful to show by a good example, even from their perspective, that Krishna consciousness is a good thing. So, we stay in touch with family, we show them that we're not just abandoning them and we're not crazy and like that. And then some of these such members become devotees. We see that in devotees' lives, that even they just stay favorable with their parents and family members, and some of them become devotees, especially in the later end of their lives. We have quite a few examples of some devotees, like mom becoming a devotee, and sometimes initiated in their last days. There's, I believe, some devotee can't remember if it was Giriraj Swami's mom, some senior devotee's mom got initiated by Shesh Guru Prabhu on their last few days of living. Pretty amazing. So, but in the ultimate sense, we're not indebted to anything material if we're serving Krishna. So, there's different ways of going about practicing that understanding. For sannyasi, they give up, this is a great vow of renunciation. They give up all social considerations. It's considered to be like social suicide, because you're completely renouncing everything and just focusing on your devotional service to Krishna. So brahmacharis They also practice in a certain light, that kind of renunciation. They don't take family members. They're just engaged in devotional service. May limit association, or they limit any sort of material association to as much as possible in their student life, and that helps acquire some qualities of renunciation and detachment from the material world. And then by such taste that one develops from that attachment, when they move into grihastha life, if they transition to grihastha life, they carry that taste of renunciation and training. And even though they may be doing so many things, they're obligated into so many areas, because when you get married, then, you have a wife, and then more duties come, like, you got to do your extended family members and her parents and your parents, and now there's kids, and, you got to keep up with the relatives, and now you have all these obligations to fulfill, and generally people have to work and provide for their family some monetary means. So even amongst all of those duties and obligations and activities, if they had some nice training and taste for renunciation in their student time, their brahmachari life, then they're always remembering, what that felt like to be completely free from entanglement and so many obligations, and just being able to focus fully on devotional service. So then that renunciation and desire, gets strengthened and strengthened over time, and then one gets vanapras and they retire, then they become very much fixed in their renunciation, because they just went through 25, 30 years where they're remembering what the nectar was like, just serving Krishna full time. And then through vanaprast and then sannyas, they give up everything material. And of course, like I said, even if one is a sannyasi in our ISKCON today, they may also keep some relationship with their family members. There's some sannyasis whose family members became devotees in the end of their life. They may have visited them every now and then. Lord Chaitanya also kept, of course, we don't want to imitate him, but he also, as a sannyasi, kept in somewhat contact with his mother. So, so in essence, you don't have any more obligations no debts. So, by serving Krishna, but we may, to remain favorable, and we have to see, like in our own self, we might have some attachments to such things, such obligations, such family members. So we may have that attachment is there. We have to see it. We have to be honest with it, and it might make us more peaceful if we stay in touch with family or certain obligations like that. It might make our mind more peaceful so we can continue on devotional service. Yes, Rishi? Or Murari Prabhu had his hand up before. Yes, Rishi?
There was a question earlier from Mercedes Mataji. Why we are so willing to accept material anxiety over anxiety to serve Krishna's devotees?
Well, that is our disease state. In 14th chapter, Krishna explains that when you're influenced by emotive nature, those certain activities are very dear to you. So because we're in a conditioned state, we're influenced by the modes of nature, and therefore activities in those modes of nature are dear to us. The mind is attracted to those activities. And so mostly passion and ignorance is very much prominent in this age of Kali, and those who have grown up in this American culture are attracted to lower modes of passion and ignorance. So many people love partying, free mixing with the opposite sex, so many activities, meat eating, gambling, intoxication, so many things are there. And so because one is conditioned by those modes, those activities are very dear to them. And even though when you rise to more goodness, you realize like how abominable these activities are. Still, we may be affected by those lower modes, so we have some attraction to material activities. So one has to perform devotional service, and that rises one to goodness and beyond. And then one will be more attracted to things in the mode of goodness and pure goodness. So it is simply our disease state that we are interested in such activities that bring us anxiety, because the mind is influenced by the mode of nature. So even though our intelligence may be saying, well, I know from Shastra and all this is not good for me to get into, but because our mind is maybe so influenced by a mode of nature, then we do that activity and we suffer, and we realize actually that bring me so much anxiety. Okay, I'm going to try to focus on, giving up that activity, going more towards goodness, more serve Krishna, like that. So it is our disease state. Solution is perform devotional service, chant Hare Krishna, and follow the principles of Bhakti Yoga, and gradually you'll become free from the lower modes of nature. And then your mind will become more dear to those things in the mode of goodness and more dear to devotional activities, like that. But there's activities in devotional service that, let's say you're influenced by passion, there's passionate sort of services that you can do. Krishna, like a lot of physical labor, physical work. Like that. It's not necessarily passionate because it's service to Krishna, but it has this kind of, active engagement. From a material point of view, it's passionate. Yes, Prabhu? Murari?
Yes, thank you for your lecture. I was thinking about this verse, this 48, and you mentioned this about that we are covered, by fault, and we are used to do fault, and like we have like the tendency to excuse ourselves that I'm such, I just must do. It's just not my fault that this is such an age. It's the age of Kali, and we always have the tendency to give the fault to something else, not to us. And we used to say, "This is my nature. I cannot act differently." So you can speak something to this, that if it is like correct thinking, or is just we are just in illusion of this.
Well, it's like it's kind of like you're justifying maybe doing sinful acts or unfavorable things for devotional service. You're justifying it by saying that, oh, well, there's so many faults and this is age of Kali, so, Are you saying, is that what your point is? It's like a justification for staying faulty?
Yes, but not only sinful activities, but even small in everyday, like living,
Yeah,
For example, I don't clean the things properly because I'm just like that.
yeah. Well, if you're conscious of it, and yeah, you're using that as a justification, it's definitely not very sincere and honest. Because the devotee is always thinking about how to improve their devotional service and always wanting to increase their offering to Krishna in various ways, like, being more clean is one thing. So it's like, well, this place is, you could say like, okay, there's a certain tendency of this place, it's like it's an old building, so, it's gonna get dirty no matter what I do, so maybe I just won't really have a high standard of cleanliness or as much as I could do, but it's gonna get dirty anyway, so, that's just the fault of it, and, whatever, like, we won't really put in much effort, So, but it will make a difference if you do put in that effort, even though it might not be like a very high standard or it might not be able to get to a very high standard of cleanliness because of the fault of the building, as being an old building and, dust coming in from all sorts of places. But at least in your own self, you'll know that you're trying your best, versus, like, well, let me just justify not trying my best because of the circumstances, the environment, of some material consideration. So it's a small example, but it is not it's not a very good state of consciousness, because that mentality can also carry over to bigger things too, not just one small thing, but also you can develop that mentality in like a bigger thing, like, well, at some point in time, by cultivating that concept, you might think, well, it's too difficult to follow this, no intoxication. Everybody's out there doing it, this age of Kali and whatever, so it's normal out there. So yeah, let me just, I'm faulty too. I grew up in it. I did it all the time before. So now I'm going to do it. So then you justify doing a sinful activity based off of the fault of the age and your fault of becoming conditioned previously to these activities. So what I can understand is that if we're really following the process of Krishna consciousness and trying to surrender to Krishna and take shelter of Krishna, then he is actually giving us a choice. He's giving us a choice to focus on improving or not, or to justify becoming more complacent. The choice is ours, but it may require quite a bit of energy and some determination to, and fight, you could say, fighting with your nature, fighting with your conditioned nature to come out on top, to win the battle against your own faults. So, those are some thoughts. I mean, you probably have a lot better things to say than me. You have anything, Gurudev? Utsahan Nishyadaya.
Enthusiasm, determination, patience. Take thy post in the spirit world. Affirm your as firmly as you can, let never matter push you down. Oh, stand heroic, man. Poem by Bhagavad Gita. So it's like a hero. Everyone's supposed to be a hero or overcome. We can't necessarily do it by ourselves. Pray to help. Pray to Krishna for help. Pray to Guru. He'll help us.
There's always this hero word always makes me remind me of this quote Prabhupada has in the purport, some purport of Bhagavad Gita, where he says that a real hero. A hero is one who is struggling with the material energy. And they're struggling with it. They're trying to give it up. They're trying to move towards transcendence, towards Krishna consciousness, but it's a struggle, but they continue the struggle. It's not that they give up the struggle because it's difficult, but they continue with it. And
Tate Nikampam, Susamikshmano, Munjana Evamakam Pipakam, Vidvag Viday Namaste, Jiveta Yogi Mukti, Pare Siddhayavak. When the difficulties come, the Lord doesn't become morose, he doesn't stop. He goes on praying to the Lord. It's hard. And goes on with the service, waiting patiently for the Lord's mercy. So for him, the spiritual world is his heritage. He inherits it.
thank you, everybody. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo. So we have a lot of devotees coming tomorrow
Hare Krishna.
for Vyasa Puja. We'll be picking them up from the airport, like 6 or 7, no, maybe like 8 or so devotees are going to be coming in tomorrow. So it'll be really enlivening atmosphere tomorrow and and for the weekend. It's going to be great. So thank you for all your services of preparation. And it's going to be a wonderful festival here. Best time of the year. Hare Krishna.